Hezu here. Anyone remember Rise of the Guardians? No, not that one. Ugh, not that one either. I've never even heard of this one. Yes! That's the one. It came out in 2012. Jack Frost's face was all over the internet for like a year. The same year the Lorax created a young hipster Onceler. Weird times those were. Anyhow, I'm gonna spiel a bunch of context for you guys before I get into the heart of this video. Rise of the Guardians, if you haven't heard of it, was directed by Peter Ramsey, the man who made Into the Spider-Verse. You know, the best animated movie of the decade that he won an Oscar for. Not to mention, he was the first African American to direct a big-budget animated feature and the first African American nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. So he's kind of a big deal. In 2012, he worked with William Joyce, a man who you might recognize in his works such as Roly Poly Oly, Meet the Robinsons, Epic, and Robots from 2005. William Joyce's works have always been interestingly odd. Rise of the Guardians, or rather Guardians of Childhood, was something that had been stirring in his brain for a long time. The inspiration came from his late daughter, and he knew he needed to make this fantasy a reality. The Guardians of Childhood had started off with an animated short from Real Effects Studios, and soon became a 5-part book series written by William Joyce. In the midst of writing these books, DreamWorks had latched on to the Rise of the Guardians project and made it into an animated feature film. Its budget was $145 million, while making roughly $307 million in the box office, which many considered to be a flop. But no one took into consideration the fact that this movie was going up against Disney's Wreck-It Ralph, which was also released in November 2012, a few weeks prior. Not to mention Life of Pi, Skyfall, The Hobbit, Twilight Breaking Dawn, Lincoln, and many other big shot movies were all released the same month.
Yikes.
So the competition was high, and the marketing campaign was poorly thought out. What are those? What is that? This looks so weird. Rise of the Guardians couldn't decide what it wanted to be. A kid's film the whole family could enjoy, or an action-packed art piece. They doled it down, simplifying the story, ultimately deciding some of what they originally were going for would be too scary for children. And yet, despite their efforts, the hammer missed the nail.
You know what? I've got something for you. Here it is. Look at all the pretty teeth with little blood and gum on them.
Many compared this movie to the extremely successful Avengers movie that had come out a few months prior, and while it may have certain parallels or similarities, it's definitely its own movie. The premise is actually shockingly morbid for a children's film, but one that indulges me all the more. Spoilers ahead! I highly recommend watching the movie first if you haven't already. It's been out for 8 years now. Come on, go! It features Jack Frost, an immortal ice spirit that embodies the nature of fun. He is summoned by the Man in the Moon, the one who orchestrates a group of well-known spirits that protect children of the world. Their longtime enemy, Pitch Black, aka the Boogeyman, longs for revenge against them for stealing his belief away, for belief is power for the spirits of this world. Basically, the dramatic, dysfunctional group soon becomes one big goofy gang of friends that, by the way, is genuinely wonderful to watch happen on screen. The writers made it so much fun. Bad guy tempts main good guy, the dumb let's split up the main characters out of betrayal 3/4 of the way into the movie cliche is initiated, reunites, defeats bad guy, and the day is saved. Goodbye, the end. It's a lot better than it sounds, trust me. I'm just summarizing it in a dull way. The heart and inspired culture put into each character and their backgrounds is so incredible and beautiful. Toothiana's feather rig and Sandman's particle mechanics must have been hell to go through, but they were incredible and groundbreaking for animation. North's tough Russian persona, Bunnymund's kangaroo-like structure, Jack's acrobatic talents, and Pitch's freaky movements. 15-year-old me, a sophomore in high school, was buzzing in my seat. This movie became one of my big hyper-focuses. This is the movie that inspired me to get into animated media. It set a path to a potential 3D career in my future. Most kids in high school have no idea who they are, let alone who they want to be. But this movie opened my eyes to a whole new world of possibilities. I fell in love with this movie and even have a shrine dedicated to the franchise on my top bookshelf. The story was very simple, but it was dubbed a kids' movie, so it really had no choice. But being dubbed for kids is like a slap in the face, if I'm being honest. Your creativity is now imprisoned in a bubble, and it alienates a good majority of your audience. The concepts and alternate storylines for this movie were insane. There were straight up fully designed spaceships and alternate bases for the characters. A really old concept dived into the idea of Jack and Pitch being brothers or best friends. Pitch was a giant creature with 12 eyes and no actual form. The final battle was supposed to take place on a satellite in space, for Pete's sake. How dare they take that out? We could have had it all, but it was all changed out of fear of scaring the toddlers. Psst! I highly recommend getting the Rise of the Guardians concept art book. It's extremely colorful and one of my favorite concept books ever made. I just stare at the pages for hours. A lot of it oriented a lot of book inspiration as well, which is what I'm about to dive into. So, we're finally here. Time to talk about the books. Hold on to your socks, guys. This gets weird. While the movie surrounds the character Jack Frost, the books dive into the Guardians' backstories. They're basically a prequel. However, the movie and the novels are not the same universe whatsoever, no matter how many times they try to convince you it is. Okay, let's do this character by character. Let's start with Jack. He has the most ludicrous differences out of all the Guardians combined. So buckle up. Movie Jack Frost was born a peasant in the 1700s in the original 13 colonies that would later become the United States of America. He had a younger sister that the fandom nicknamed Emma, but her real name is Mary, which makes sense since William Joyce's children are named Jack and Mary. His age is debated from being either 14 to 17, but most people go with 17. So in the movie, he's 317 years old. And for 300 of those years, he had amnesia. Pretty straightforward, right? But the books are far from it. So let's get into book Jack Frost.
Wait, Hezu, I thought these were prequels. How could Jack be in them?
I'm glad you asked. Truthfully, Jack doesn't exist until the 5th and final installment. For the first 4 books, he was an alien from space named Nightlight. Yeah, Book Jack was never human. He was Man in the Moon's adopted older brother, who also acted as his royal guardsman. Considering the book's timeline, Book Jack ends up being well over 1,000 years old. Nightlight has battled Book Pitch, aka the Nightmare King, for thousands of years. During the first war with the Nightmare King, Nightlight defeated him by stabbing his dagger into Pitch's heart, but in turn was sucked into his soul, imprisoning him.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
The two were stuck in a coma for hundreds of years, until a moonbeam found them and awoke Pitch by freeing Nightlight from his soul. Yeah, pretty weird knowing that this guy becomes this guy. Didn't expect a reincarnation trope in this series, but whatever, I've read worse. Lots of stuff happens, a second war with Pitch breaks out, North attempts to execute Pitch, but Nightlight stops the blade. Pitch's blood mixes into Nightlight's wound, which acts sort of like a Harry Potter scar by connecting the two. Pitch is imprisoned, but Nightlight has this weird, sudden urge to leave and go find himself in the world. Something happens with a weird serpent, the vampire dude from Hotel Transylvania, some weird werewolves show up. All kind of pointless characters that don't add anything to the series or the plot. Nightlight is found staring into the window of the family house of Ardeline, a nuclear family of 2 parents and 2 kids, Victor, Irina, Anna, and Jaklovich. They immediately adopt this complete stranger of a teenager into their house and generously give him food and clothes, no questions asked. They even tuck him in and give him a good night kiss. Did Nightlight brainwash these people? What is going on? If I saw a white-haired kid staring at me from my window in the dead of night in winter, I'd freak the frick out and call the police, or better yet, an exorcist. Also, how can they see him? He's a spirit. They shouldn't be able to see him. So I guess Nightlight basically got adopted by these people and lived like a normal human. This is probably Joyce's way of converting Nightlight and Jack Frost into humans in the book series, since they were never born human here. The Ardelenes were the ones that gave him the blue hoodie. I really don't think this piece of clothing needs significance. Everyone just assumed Movie Jack stole it since his old cloak was torn and ratty and it made him look younger and more modern. Anyway, one day a bunch of nightmares or werewolves attack him and his adopted siblings. The vampire wolf dude takes them away to safety while Jack fights the nightmares. During the battle, he sinks into a pond of frozen water, pretending to be dead, so Pitch won't hurt his adopted family to get to him anymore. Wait, okay, so you're telling me he willingly stayed in the water to forget his family so Pitch couldn't use them against him? Okay. 100 years later, he resurfaces as an amnesiac and grows into an adult and starts hanging out with a bunch of old artists and poets. People of the 1900s that will totally be recognized and cherished by children from the 21st century reading about fictional fairy tales. Jack is walking with his boring old adult friends during World War I and sees some children begging for money on the street. He then initiates a snowball fight between the kids and the adults, apparently not considering the fact that these children are probably begging for food money and have no energy to be playing. It's only then does he remember who he was and returns to the Guardians. Ugh! Oh my god! Pages and pages and pages of unnecessary padding. What was the point of any of this? So Jack could live his life as a human? Why did he have to live his life as an adult for a time? What was that about? Is it like Shazam where he can suddenly switch between child and adult now? What's going on? This adds nothing to the story or his character. It's so forced and weird. Jack basically denied Pitch's death sentence, flipped the Guardians off, and went on vacation for 100 years as a dingy, depressing poet, and came back as a completely different person after witnessing children doomed to poverty. Listen, if you feel like you're having a stroke, don't worry. That's normal. That's just how Joyce writes. Someday I'll make you laugh, Bunnymund. Me? Laugh? That would be historic. Hookahs don't laugh. No kidding. Actually, no. I mean, yes. Well, either way, I'm not, as you say, kidding. Pukas never laugh as far as I know and have difficulty in kidding. I know.
Then why did you say it? Oh, you were restating an obvious fact to underscore your perception that I needn't have stated the fact in the first place. In other words, you were being sarcastic and/or making a joke.
Nope, I was just kidding. That doesn't entirely make sense. Really? Are you kidding? No, I mean, yes, wait. Yes to the first question and no to the...
Jack and Nightlight should have been A, separate beings, or B, Jack merely hosts Nightlight's soul. Glow sticks last longer if you put them in the fridge, after all. There was absolutely no need to make it so ridiculously complicated. Nightlight was already becoming human with Catherine and the other Guardians. He didn't need to go on this weird journey with a bunch of weird, boring old strangers to find himself. It's just ridiculous. Okay, that's the worst of it. Everything else should be easier to follow. Pitch Black versus the Nightmare King. Not much is known about movie Pitch's past. However, Pitch refers to the Man in the Moon as an old friend and even ruled an event called the Dark Ages, before the Guardians came into the picture. So it's safe to assume he's been around for a very long time. He originally could only play with shadows, but recently found out how to manipulate Sandman's sand into nightmares. He and Sandman may even have a rivalry. Despite being a spirit of fear, Pitch is a very lonely person who just wanted a family, much like Jack. Aside from this and his British origin, any further history about Pitch is unknown. Pitch's history in the books, however, leaks with info and is the most flaunted over in the fandom. But before we dive into it, let's discuss the Nightmare King. Unlike movie Pitch, he isn't a skinny little twink. Nope. He is 4 times the size of a 7-foot-tall man. He is huge! He's also muscular and has a weird taste in wardrobe. But I guess movie Pitch didn't fall far from that either. The Nightmare King is a warlord, master of fearling pirates, creatures made of the darkness of space that attack and consume the light and life force of others. The Nightmare King is a monster He has no compassion, unlike movie Pitch. He murdered Man in the Moon's parents, and nearly murdered North if it weren't for Bunnymund's healing abilities. He is also burned by sunlight, akin to a vampire's weakness. The Nightmare King would even hunt down children. He's obsessed with turning them into nightmare princes and princesses. A few of these targets are the Man in the Moon, Catherine, who later becomes Mother Goose, and perhaps even Nightlight himself.
Hey kid, let's go to the arcade and play some video games. What do you say?
Ignore him and walk away.
The reason why he's so obsessed with obtaining a child is because of who he was before the Nightmare King. Cosmodus Pitchner, the greatest warrior of the golden age of space. Yep, the Boogeyman is also a space alien in this series. He was a general, undefeated in his battle against the Fearling pirates. He lived on a moon within the Orion constellation, with his wife and daughter. His daughter was a rebellious, strong-willed girl named Emily Jane Pitchner. The fandom used to call her Seraphina before her official name came out. Frankly, Emily Jane is a poor choice of a name since, this is space. William stays too European with some of his name choices for these characters. Pitch's wife isn't graced with a name, but William claimed he imagined her to be similar to Linda Evangelista. One day, Pitch was away from home fighting an ambush of Fearlings when a gust of them attacked his home. Emily had escaped for a joyride prior to the attack, but her mother was trapped inside. In an attempt to save her daughter's life, she bundled up a blanket, pretending to take her sleeping daughter with her, as she jumped out the window to her death before she could be consumed.
Jesus Christ.
So much for labeling this a children's book series. Cosmodus comes home to find it decimated, assuming his daughter and wife were killed. He falls to despair. He never believed in murder before, but so driven with madness does he decapitate every single one of the Fearling creatures on board his ship. He locked up the rest found later in a massive space prison which he alone guarded. The Fearlings mimicked his daughter's voice one day, which broke him down. Pitch's locket, a silver locket he wore around his neck, of his precious daughter, is an essential item in this series of Pitch's weakness, much like a Horcrux to Lord Voldemort. He gazed at this locket one last time before giving in and opening the doors to the prison, allowing the Fearlings to escape and possess his body entirely, creating the cruel, shadowy, demonic Nightmare King. Nicholas St. North versus North. Movie North is older and weighs more. Although people call him Santa Claus, he goes by North as in the North Pole. He uses snow globes as a form of magical transformation. He's just straight up a Russian Santa Claus. What more do you want from me? Book North is more interesting. Book North was an orphan raised by Cossack bandits. In the prequels, he's scrawny and somewhat a pirate who stole instead of gifted. His Cossack brethren were cursed into being his elves for the rest of eternity. Okay. On top of being a Russian Santa Claus Cossack pirate, he's also a wizard who was taught the ways of magic by Father Time. He nearly dies in the books, but is saved by Bunnymund. He has a platonic family-like relationship with Catherine, aka Mother Goose, who also has familial ties to Father Time. He took refuge in a place he originally intended to rob called Santov Clausen, which suggests the name Santa Claus was inspired by his new home. Spending time in Santov Clausen teaches him the way of love and gifts, and that's basically how he becomes a really lovable Santa Claus character. Expert Aster Bunnymund versus Bunny. Bunny is the guardian that went through the most transformation when redesigning him. In the beginning, the animators tried their best to replicate his book form as best they could, but they realized his cloak was holding him back, and his unnatural robotic eggs were simply not fitting his character at all. And having a stuck-up old man character amongst a group of lively spirits just wasn't fitting the chemistry. So he's the best example for why the books are an alternate universe. Movie Bunny is located in an underground tunnel system under Australia, the Warren, if you will. Eggs are born from the flowers that grow there and walk themselves to their destinations. Everything here is natural and floral, including the dye-colored river that flows through the opening. Carved stone eggs act as the Warren's guardians. Bunnymund, before he was chosen, was a mere tiny bunny. It's unknown what he did to become a guardian, and a, beefcake, for that matter. Book Bunny is a lot stranger. Full-on culture shock compared to the movie. His full name is Egbert Astor Bunnymund, a hoity-toity old man who wears heavy clothing and uses a staff for a weapon instead of Bunnymund's boomerang. He, too, is an alien from space.
Daddy.
The Earth used to be egg-shaped, and much to Bunnymund's annoyance, he was forced to pound it into a ball so it wouldn't hurtle itself into the sun. He's the last survivor of the Puka, an advanced bunny race wiped out into extinction via fearlings. He wields a relic that allows him to time travel, but it's never really used or of great importance for some weird reason. And Bunnymund can fly with his ears. He is a confectionery cook and a robotic scientist. His warren is more like a facility-built tunnel with thousands of robotic eggs that make up his army. If he consumes chocolate, he basically turns into the Hulk by growing new limbs, growing in size, increasing his strength, or many other weird mutations. So yeah, Book Bunny is definitely not our movie bunny. They're practically polar opposites, and I'd like to keep it that way. Toothiana. Movie Tooth lived in a mountain palace somewhere in Asia. She's at least 440 years old, super cheerful, can telepathically sense when someone has lost a tooth and where it's located, has a small crush on Jack Frost, and claims all the Guardians were someone on Earth before they were chosen. So really, her existence debunks the whole alien thing. She's the guardian of joyful memory and has hundreds of thousands of little hummingbird fairies to help her in her mission. All around, a great character.
Tooth. Fingers out of mouth.
Oh, sorry. They're beautiful.
Book Toothiana is colder, less friendly than Movie Tooth. She was born in a place called Punjam Hai Lu, a magical jungle full of talking animals. She was born to Rajmi, a bird woman part of the Sisters of Flight organization, and a human man named Harum. Toothiana's origins have caused a tad bit of drama on the internet over her skin color. If you've seen art of Toothiana on the internet depicted with darker skin, it's because her parents are from Southeast Asia. In the movie, she's definitely European, but her origins and even cultural integration in her palace suggests otherwise, which has upset people into thinking she's been whitewashed. I'm not gonna get into it, but it's just something worth noting. Toothiana sprouted wings at the age of 11, wings of which aren't fairy, but feather. She started collecting the teeth of her friends in the human village in exchange for her wealth. She'd give them tiny rubies and emeralds in exchange for these small little bones, which was a big mistake. The adults got wind of this and became jealous of Toothiana's rich family. They kidnapped her, locking her in a cage and held her for ransom. The mob murdered her parents, but she alone managed to escape. Instead of using her wings to fight, she wields 2 cutlass swords. Her facial decor and pants differ from the movie form as well. The baby teeth in the books aren't her sentient helpers, they are merely an extension of her. She can disperse into a flock of them, much like a vampire turning into a flock of bats would. Now, Book Toothiana has some continuity issues, especially conceptually. This is where William Joyce gets a little, cuckoo. He had claimed one of the concept sketches for Toothiana was actually her sister named Vanish because she vanished so quickly from the mob of people that killed her family. Vanish drives Jack crazy, but in a way he can't figure out. Okay, time out. Vanish doesn't exist, y'all. She's never alluded to in the books once. Later, William Joyce had mistakenly stated Jack's sister name in the movie was Flea, but he corrected himself later saying Flea was actually the name of Tooth's sister. Vanish and Flea mean almost the same thing, but they are vastly different names. I don't know if he changed his mind or what is going on here. What's even more odd is there was a framed piece of this same work with the words Tippy the Tooth Fairy at the bottom of it. What the hell is going on? Toothiana, Vanish, Flea, Tippy? The Tooth Fairy's sister isn't even canon! Why is this such a mess? people in the fandom have even said, since they are desperate to connect the books with the movie, that the Tooth Fairy in the movie isn't actually the Toothiana from the books at all, but she's indeed the concepted Vanish. Simply because Booktooth has no interest in Jack and looks almost nothing like her book counterpart. This is just... There are so many plot holes in that statement, and we still have so much to go over. I'm not going to mess with this any further. Joyce, please just pick something and stick to it. You can't change your mind 80% of the way through the series and flip it on its back. You're confusing the hell out of your audience. Movie Sandman was originally designed to have a ship. Instead, it was simplified so he's designed to float upon clouds or travel by smaller dream sand manipulation, though in the video game, he still has this concepted ship. In offhand movie info, he was instated as the first Guardian. He's mute, but has a lot to say. He hulks out if you piss him off, but otherwise acts ditzy and dreamy. Book Sandman is an alien from space, part of a group of pilots who chase down shooting stars like a bunch of cowboys. His full name is Sanderson Monsanuzzi. He's a lot calmer and sweeter in the books, and he lives on a traveling island made of sand instead of a ship. Mermaids visit him frequently, so you can consider him a ladies' man. He's great friends with Pitch's daughter Emily, aka Mother Nature. The first wish/dream he ever heard on Earth was from the Man in the Moon, who wished for Sandman to wake from his coma when he and Emily crashed to Earth together. I'll explain more of this later. Man in the Moon. In the movie, he only psychically speaks, so we never hear it. There's a rough smile that can be seen upon the moon after the movie climax. He's the one who chose the Guardians, and it is unclear why he stopped speaking to Jack Frost. And that's unfortunately all we know about him. He's kind of an elusive figure. The Man in the Moon in the book series, however, has a lot of info on him, along with the Lunanoth family. His parents, Tsar and Serena, are aliens that kind of crashed onto the moon? Or their ship became the moon? I don't know. There was a war with Pitch, alright? Nightlight saved little Manny, who grew up surrounded by alien servant moonbots, lunar moths, and lunar mice. He watches over the Earth via giant telescope, collects lost balloons, and wishes to guard the children of Earth, in hopes their lives won't be as lonely as his. He can talk, and we see his face very often. Part of his family's old ship fell to Earth, and are now deemed as relics. Each Guardian is put in charge of a relic. North has Tsar's transforming sword, Bunnymund has a life-giving and potentially time-traveling egg, Toothiana has the Man in the Moon's tooth secured in a ruby box that allows her to access anyone and everyone's memory, Sandman has the dream sand fuel, and Jack is the reincarnation of Nightlight, the Lunanoth Royal Guard. Pitch's locket could also be considered a relic. These tools are all used to defeat Pitch. The only relic that we know exists in the movie is Dream Sand. The others are never mentioned or alluded to despite their importance in the book series. Now let's get into characters that are non-existent in the movie universe. Catherine, aka Mother Goose. Catherine is a young girl whose parents were killed by a blizzard on their way to Santof Clausen. Ombrick, aka Father Time, took her in as an orphan and raised her. She was much of a bookworm and had a great friendship with Nightlight, which was unfortunately forced into something more despite their really young age. As I said, she was a bookworm who told and wrote stories in a book made out of a living butterfly, or rather, a real bookworm named Mr. Qwerty. The Nightmare King has an extreme obsession with this girl, and tempts her with her teeth in comparison to the Antarctica movie scene with Jack. However, children do not lose their teeth until they turn 6. And Catherine was a mere baby when she lost her parents. Her teeth should contain no memories of them. It doesn't matter in the end anyway, since her tooth box is smashed and disregarded by Pitch. She really shouldn't have had that in the first place, though. Catherine later grows old and becomes Mother Goose, guardian of storytelling. The reason she's named Mother Goose is because she adopted a small snow goose named Kailash when they were both very young. According to Joyce, she lives in a treehouse called Ganderly. She is served by men called Raken Turks who use the power of words to cause harm. In the books, since Nightlights do not lose teeth, she is the one to return Jack's memory, not Toothiana. Umbric Shalazar is a magical wizard who was born in the lost underwater city of Atlantis. As a time traveler who strictly observes, he becomes Father Time. But, in the meantime, he's the adoptive father of Catherine, and he's taken north in as an apprentice. As interesting as his backstory is, you're lucky that Joyce even skims over it. Emily Jane Pitchner, aka Pitch's daughter, aka Mother Nature. The apple does not fall far from the tree of cruelty, eh, Emily? When Emily escapes the feelings that attacked her home at the age of 6, she flees only to be found and adopted by a giant, blind constellation called Typhon. Typhon adopted her and taught her the sacred power of nature. Emily waited 10 years for her real father to find her, but he never came. She became selfishly enraged and destroyed an innocent ship that was passing by, murdering everyone inside. Typhon was in shock by her actions and her heartless exclaim of him not being her father. He sealed her within a shooting star and banished her from his realm. The Sandman one day caught her star, preventing her from crashing into and destroying planets. He soon tamed her and sailed with her across the universe for a time, until the two crashed to Earth together. Before their crash, Emily's star had become so hot it nearly turned into a scorching sun. The Nightmare King came across them, making Emily go into shock. She didn't realize that this had happened to her father. This makes her disassociate with other spirits, heavily distrusting them and potentially even becoming violent because of her spiritual nature. Otherwise, she stepped back as a neutral party, not wishing to involve herself in the war between her father and the Guardians.
Oh, good. A neutral party. Then I'm going to ignore you. But you must be used to that by now.
Lunar llamas. Oh, sorry, lunar lamas. They are Man in the Moon's followers. So, yeah, the Man in the Moon has a religion surrounding him, kind of mimics that of Buddhist monks that speak one after the other a little creepily. The Nightlights. So, Nightlight, apparently had 7 brothers. Each guarded a generation of a Lunanoth heir. Once their job is done, they are whisked away to become a constellation in the sky. They're not supposed to sleep, and they're not supposed to kiss. Nightlight did both, violating the terms of his knighthood. I assumed he was going to become a human so he could grow up with Catherine and his other friends, but that's not the case? It's kind of unclear what was supposed to happen to him, since his changing into Jack Frost interfered with his fate. Twiner. Jack's staff is alive. Its name is Twiner, and it can shapeshift into a bow and arrow. That's kind of cool. He came from a tree that grew on a Native American warrior burial ground. Not really necessary information, since he's literally a stick. Now, I am not a stick, but if I were a stick, I would not be pleased at being manhandled and thwacked against things in combat. Twiner either has no feelings or he's been brainwashed. Just like Jack's adopted Ardeline nuclear family, consisting of Victor, Irina, Anna, and Jaklovich. A family that mimics the purpose of the Bennetts in the movie, but with far less significance. Shadowbent, a weird vampire werewolf thing. He's just some dude, alright? I don't know why he's here. Jack's history was supposed to involve wolves, okay? Who cares? Nightmare men, nightmare pirates, and fearlings are all demonic creatures of the dark that act sometimes like a hive mind. While they are similar to the movie's nightmares, they do not take animalistic appearances, and some have the ability to talk. They're more like the Nightmare King's dark soldiers. Genie. Genie was a robot made by North. This is William Joyce we're talking about here. That man cannot bear to make a franchise without a robot in it. Genie was a robot made by North. Its name and purpose parallels its existence to the genie in the magic lamp. An AI robotic presence in the 1500s is weird and doesn't make a lot of sense, which is odd considering the author had a sudden interest in history in the last book. But it's there, and we can't really do anything about it. There's the Santoff Clausen residence, a dude named William and his 20-something sons he also named William. Why do you name your children after yourself? Don't do that. That's weird. A bear, someone named Petrov, the spirit of the forest. I don't know. Not really important people. They're just side characters. Did I mention the Sisters of Flight? Well, they're Tooth's ancestral family along with her non-existent sister named Vanish. Her mother Rashmi came from this family and married an ex-slave named Harum. And there's also a flying elephant that is basically kind of like a Dumbo reference. Oh, and the Monkey King. The Monkey King comes from Toothiana's story. He's the one that killed her parents. He's like a sub-villain. I'd tell you his backstory, but I frankly just don't care about him. I'm tired. No more. We're done. I'm done. Too much. Too many characters. I'd also like to reiterate that Jamie Bennett, Mary Overland, Jackson Overland, and Baby Tooth do not exist in the book series, while Nightlight, Catherine Ombrick, Emily Jane, and Cosmodus don't exist in the movie either. It's safe to say, and clear as day, the movie and the books are not the same universe. On that note, this ends part 1 of What the Frick Was the Rise of the Guardians book series. Part 2 is coming soon. Quick shout out to my Patreons, and shout out to DJBX50 on Twitter, back at it again with the adorable drawings. This time with me as a cute villager. I don't have Animal Crossing, but I still love this. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Love y'all. Bye bye.